Theron Skees knows that great storytelling isn't just for theme parks, it's the foundation of unforgettable experiences. As a former Disney Imagineering executive, he's helped bring some of Disney's most immersive projects to life, on land, at sea, and around the world. In this episode, he explains narrative experience design and how companies can use this to create meaningful connections with their audiences. So grab a drink, settle in. This is Marketing Over Bourbon. Hey, Theron. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really, really excited to talk with you today.
It's
We've
my
got
pleasure.
a lot to cover. So cheers.
Cheers.
To you, Theron Skees.
Does ginger ale
for being
count?
here. It does. It does. Mine is bourbon and ginger ale, which
Okay.
I've never done before.
Oh, very cool. Consistency.
And some water. Yes, exactly. All right. So, Theron, before I dive in, because I've got a lot of questions for you, we've got a ton of stuff to cover in your career, your book, your podcast. First, what's your story?
My story, well, it all started, believe it or not, in 1977. I'll age myself, I was 10, and Star Wars came out. And it was such a significant moment. Star Wars changed so much, you know, in cinematography and American film, so that's obvious. But for me, it really introduced this idea of a world and telling stories about worlds. And in those worlds, there were heroes and there were villains and there were creatures and there were planets, and it just opened my mind to accept this idea that there were other places and other people lived in these fantasy places. And that just started me on a path of wanting to be in film. And I didn't quite know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to be in film. I knew I didn't want to be in front of the camera, but I wanted to be a part of making that magic. And that pursuit took me to Orlando at the time when it was Hollywood East in the 80s. Universal was building sound stages, and so was Disney, and they were gearing up for filming. And so I broke in. I did HBO films. I did all kinds of interesting things. I was a scenic artist and a painter, a sculptor, and that probably came out of my childhood. My dad was a builder, so I worked with all kinds of materials. I wasn't afraid of hard work, and it was a really neat way to combine a passion for telling stories in film with a craft, a handcraft that I had, and that's kind of how it started. And then I realized after quite a few films and commercials and TV shows that nobody was seeing what I was seeing. You could walk into the sets and you'd see this whole other world, this whole other place. And when filming was over, it got sawed and into the garbage and the props go back to storage. So I discovered theme parks and I made that transition in, well, that was early days, 1991.
Wow.
And I ended up in Paris building the first in Euro Disneyland, believe it or not.
Amazing. Amazing. So what are some early experiences that shaped your approach to storytelling?
Definitely was, I would say, film was the first, because I'm a huge film buff. I love it. Even to this day, it's a way that I use to stay inspired. It's just storytelling in film. And when I ended up going to work with Imagineering, it was at that time that I discovered that all of the original Imagineers were filmmakers. So there was this really nice synergy between something that just came naturally for me, of this desire to tell these stories, and then more importantly, how to tell them. And it just seemed to fit really, really well in Imagineering. Now, as I mentioned, I started in the field, if you will. I was a field art director. So that's a talent that is literally working with the construction teams to execute some high level of thematic finish. And so it was a way to combine construction knowledge and art into that space. And then as my career grew and opportunities came, and opportunities that I pushed, hey, I can do these things too, why don't you let me? It enabled me to move into, I would say, the move backwards in the process to closer to where those stories were conceived and how those stories were designed. I understood how they were built. And then as I kind of moved backwards, if you will, in the process to get to how they were conceived.
Amazing. So in your time with Disney Cruise Line, what were some of the biggest creative challenges that you had in translating Disney's immersive storytelling to the sea?
It's a great...
And the island.
Yes, and the island. It's a really great question because when you work in theme parks, I don't think you realize this unless you've worked in other venues that are very different than a theme park. But theme parks, obviously, they're open, right, for the most part, and they're very large venues. So you have giant buildings, you have trees, you have all these things, and it's really open. And I just never considered the details of the venue that I worked in for so many years until I got to the cruise line, because you have to take all of that magic, all of that storytelling, all of that placemaking, and you have to move it to principally an interior experience. So it was so much more than just interior design. It was, the other thing about theme parks is, if you think about it, it's pretty much a experience on a plane, right? There's not a lot of vertical, you're not going 15 stories.
Right.
And at Space Mountain, for example, guests don't hang out for 7 days in Space Mountain. So, and I never really thought about that until I started, leading at the cruise line. So you had to take this perception that there was a vertical connection within the ship as well as a horizontal connection, and all of those adjacencies had to work together. It couldn't be a record scratch, or it couldn't be a friction point, right? For guests to go from here up to here, all the way to here, then back, then down to there. So that was a brand new way of thinking about the guest journey and how to plan that out. On top of all of the challenges of how do I squeeze all this amazing Disney placemaking into interior spaces. So it was really complex, but amazingly fun.
So I'm going to add a couple of things to that to get your perspective. So one is, when the Magic was built, it was built in 2 different parts of Italy, right? And floated together.
Right.
And so tell me about the challenge of designing these experiences when you're imagining what this is going to be, but you don't actually get to even walk it until it's put together. Because I remember having worked on the first of the marketing materials,
right,
when the real ship came from Italy and sailed across the Atlantic, and we had written all these FAQs in the back of the brochure, and then we're walking the ship going, oh no, that is totally not the experience whatsoever.
Yeah.
It's different. So how do you take that lens of imagining what it's like, translate that for the people who are building and designing the ship, and then making sure that's exactly what you imagined when you experience it for the first time as a guest?
Yeah, it's a really great question, because parallel with your question is, I think, a technology story. Because when the Magic and the Wonder were conceived, designed, and built, there wasn't really a digital walkthrough kind of technology, or a simulation, or a pre-visualization like we have today. And boy, if you work those projects like you did and like I did back in the day, you really appreciate the technology and the ease that it gives you to examine those spaces. So in that time, there was quite a lot of mock-ups. So you didn't know what a cabin, a stateroom on a ship would look like, for example, just based on the floor plan and the elevations. You had to physically build one, and then you'd walk inside of it. You'd see how everything worked together, but that only went so far. Because you can't build every single interior space.
Right.
So there's a lot that those teams had to do through renderings, through actual physical models, dimensional models, to really convincingly show what the experience was going to be like there. So those old school days were really informed, I think, all of the technologies that the industry now enjoys.
Yeah.
Perfect example is a dark ride, right? Back in the day at Imagineering.
Yeah, explain what a dark ride is.
Okay,
just
a
in
dark
case people
ride.
don't understand.
So a dark ride is like Peter Pan's Flight, or one of our favorites, right? A Small World. After all, get that song out of your head. The way that the early teams actually did that was they would build models of the scenes. So, as the Pirates, for example, Pirates of the Caribbean, you'd go through, and during the boat, you would look at different scenes, and the boat would direct you, the ride vehicle would direct you to see those things. Well, what the Imagineering team would do was make models, dimensional models, of all those scenes. Now here's the cool part. They would, just about to where we're sitting, they would put them all at this level, the models, and then they would put you in a rolling chair, and they would roll you through like you were on the vehicle.
Amazing.
Looking into the models in a room that was dark, and you'd light the models.
Very cool.
And super labor intensive, right? Super expensive, because there's no other use for the models than that. But that, I think, informed the great technology that we take advantage of today.
Yeah, that's remarkable. By the way, so while we're on the subject of the cruise line, before I go to the next question, I feel like I saw a picture that you shared recently in LinkedIn or something. Is there something with your name on it on a Disney island or associated with the cruise line? Please tell me more.
Well,
I feel like I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
Well,
isn't that an Imagineering honor to have your name?
It's a Disney executive honor.
Great. Okay. Yes.
Because I was a VP, so I was the senior executive at the time, and I didn't know that they were going to do it. So it was, honestly, I didn't know. It was a real honor that it was installed there. And then on one of the visits, because we did quite a lot of visits there that were, I know your audience is not going to believe this, but was business related. We did quite a lot of cruises that were completely business related, and you get to the island, you go backstage. Anyways, they brought me out. Look, this is really cool.
So tell everybody what it is.
So it's a sign, and I'm trying to remember. I think it's.
Is it like a bar named after you?
No,
What
it's
was it?
if you are, when you're at Castaway Cay, the whole idea is that there was a big storm and all this interesting things washed up on shore, and that's kind of the tropical haven. That was the backstory there. The story. So you ended up with a sign for like a fishing company, or you ended up. I think that's the one that they did for me.
Washed up on shore.
Yeah, it was. So it looks aged, and it looks like this old thing, and it just says Skees Boating or Skees Shipping Company, or I forget what it is, something like that. And they did my wife as the little boat, which was the little boat, and then the boat's name was Judy. So I'm like, okay, that you won my heart, because you.
Okay, that's very thoughtful.
Because families, go through a lot when we work the hours that we work. So I thought that was really cool. Here's the real thing. I thought, look, I got laid off in 2020. There was an executive that took my role, and so I'm assuming it's long gone and it's cycled out with the new exec. And since we've been talking about this, it probably will be. But one of the people that follows me said, "I'm on Castaway Cay," and I just took a picture, and they saw that it was still there.
Okay.
So that's why I posted it. I was kind of in shock that it was still there.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. Disney Springs and the transformation. So, I say in the show Kungaloosh, which many people know if you're a big Disney fan. Back in the day at Pleasure Island, Adventurers Club, you had the salute, you had the motto, you had a song, of all of it.
Yep.
So people are very, very emotionally connected to their Disney memories and experiences. And Pleasure Island, including cast member night on Thursday nights, was one of them. So tell me about the vision of Disney Springs and the transformation, and how did you not only work through the transformation, which again, a lot of people had very passionate thoughts and feelings around this, but also the balance in storytelling with the commercial element of Disney Springs?
Sure. I'm so sorry, but my therapist won't let me talk about it.
Well, that's bad. Just
I say that because it was a seriously difficult. I got my doctorate on that project in the way to do projects. And honestly, I in general, I say it's probably the most complex and difficult project I ever did with Disney. And I think the main reason for that is there were so many firsts for the company. The company had RD&Es, right? Retail, dining, and entertainment, mixed use properties in many different places, but they never were going to scale at the size that they were going to do at Disney Springs. So the real breakthrough moment for taking 3 properties that were created to be independent properties over 30 years. So the Village, Pleasure Island, right,
West Side.
and West Side.
Yep.
That was 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they were not connected. I mean, you literally walk through the parking lot to get to West Side from the Village.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'd have to pay to get through Pleasure Island.
Right.
So it was not Disney's finest development, and one of the big challenges commercially was that there were buses showing up on property and busing guests into downtown Orlando to go shopping. So if you know anything about Disney World, that's a complete antithesis to the whole entire point of Disney World. So there was the impetus to fix it. How do we fix it? How do we fix it right? And the breakthrough moment for us was the story, because we had to unify quite a lot of existing content that wasn't going to be
or infrastructure or something, right? World of Disney survived.
That's right. Buildings, businesses, underground infrastructure that nobody saw, waterways. We had to integrate all that, but we also had to expand way over 1 million square feet, and we had to bring in 100 new tenants. So how do you tell a inherently Disney story without using any of the theme park stuff, right? You couldn't have the Fab Five meeting and greeting outside of Zara.
Yeah, you're not going to have characters there.
Never going to work. Right. And we couldn't use 3 concentric circles. We couldn't use most of the stuff that we use, most of the design detailing that you'd use in a theme park. So in a sense, we had to kind of develop a whole new way to tell stories where the guests would walk in and at a gut level feel this is Disney, but that couldn't choke out any of the 100 new tenants who had to have their brand. So it really was the first time in my whole career where we have this design where we're creating something that was completely environmental. It really had to do a lot of heavy lifting in the placemaking and in the environment, and had to balance this commercial, as you said, with story and emotion. And I think the success of the venue speaks for itself, and the team that I had the privilege of leading was amazing. And I think we were able to pull it off.
Is there a storyline to Disney Springs, and how would people see those cues or feel those cues? Definitely.
Because we had so many different architectural styles that were staying in the business, in the construction industry, we call it brownfield. So we're literally leaving quite a lot of infrastructure. So we had an inherent challenge with bungalow style arts and crafts building in the Village, very funky, design with the Virgin Megastore and AMC. Those, you remember Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. This just doesn't work. And then Pleasure Island, there wasn't really a serious design aesthetic there that guided a single story. I mean, there was a single story, but the architecture was all over the place. So
but
that's
there's a bridge at least that sort of gives you this ability to transition the story.
There was a portal there.
Yeah.
So now that we had to blend everything, how do you do that? And after quite a lot of work, the story became, what if this was a town that existed? And because towns begin and they develop over time, they're influenced by the economy, where they're built, the citizenry, the industry. So we thought, well, we could tell a story that was almost like an archaeological site, that over time it grew and changed. So that landed the best. So we said the town was the spring, centered around a regular, a natural Florida spring. It's a Florida story. We started in 1850 with cattle, and grew all the way through to when Walt actually purchased the property. And as a part of that was the discussion we were having earlier about Kismet. Kismet was the town where Walt's parents were married and they honeymooned. So we kind of imagined that around the dinner table that his parents were talking about how amazing Central Florida was and our time during our honeymoon. So when it came time for Walt to actually purchase on the East Coast, of course, he was drawn in by Central Florida. And when he purchased the land, the Springs as a town was a part of that purchase. So it gave us the story hook that we needed based in fact, a Disney fact. And then we were able to kind of lovingly restore all of this infrastructure that was there. Some of it was brand new, but we had to make it look like it was built at a certain time and restored. So it was, the story was what gave us the North Star for the whole entire project.
I think it does start with the North Star, right? And a clear vision for everyone to understand, and something to where it's this unifying message of clarity so that everyone understands if it's this or that, everyone has the same path. Perfect. You worked in Paris and in Hong Kong. Amazing. Culturally, Hong Kong, Paris, Florida, California, Tokyo, you name it. All these things are very, very different. So how do the cultural differences really influence design? And how do you adapt the Disney brand to inherently include both the tradition of Disney and yet the reverence to the culture in which the parks sits?
It's a really great question, because what we were just talking about was story. And with Imagineering with Disney, of course, story is at the core of everything that's done. But when you're telling stories in another part of the world, it has to be a culturally relevant story for the people. They're meant to attend. They're meant to engage emotionally with the experiences. So that's what you start with, is you start with, how do I take, if it's, for example, a Magic Kingdom park, how do I take the core classic story of Magic Kingdom and how do I transition that into the same core story, but do it in a way that's culturally relevant? So if you look at Main Street USA at Disneyland Paris, that's a perfect example. It's an amazing, Eddie Sato, amazing job of taking into account what Europeans would, what lens they would look through to see that American turn of the century space. And it is spectacle. It's over the top. There's two stories. There's a whole entire bypass that is covered. So you don't have to walk down the middle of Main Street. You can, in a sense, bypass it. And the reason is because of weather, right? It snows there. So there's so much of that that's important. Even in a European story, as close as Western Europe is to an American, mindset, we think of things very similarly culturally. There's many things that we're completely separate about. And then you take that lens and apply it to working in Southeast Asia. It's a totally different perspective of how to approach creating a story there that will resonate with an audience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I remember back in the day when I was in Disney marketing and Linda was leading marketing, and she came in and introduced branding and point of difference for each of the parks. And I remember at the time, I don't know if this is still their point of difference now, but Magic Kingdom was all around fantasy. So how do you take the essence of that and translate it into a culture that maybe tells a story differently than how we tell the story of fantasy?
Yeah. Telling the story in another culture requires a lot of research. And oftentimes you need to bring on board a lot of culturally relevant people, experts from the culture. Musicians, architects, philosophers, designers, performers. Kind of depends on what you're creating. And that makes a huge difference, because you can sit with them and talk about how to tell stories, how to represent places, how to tell a fantasy story And that is really good in the positive because you're forming what you're going to do, but also if you think of it in a negative, it's what not to do.
Absolutely.
And in Asia, there's quite a lot of things that you don't do that wouldn't matter to us. So for example, a story, I moved all my stuff into my office in Hong Kong, went to IKEA, bought a lamp from IKEA, the whole thing, put it in there, and started working, and my team kind of came in and we started meeting, and it was probably the first week. And my admin support said, can I tell you something? And I said, yeah, what's going on? We've had a discussion about your lamp here. And I was like, you're discussing my lamp, And she said, yeah, because it's a white paper lantern. And white paper lanterns are only used for funerals. And they remind us in our culture of the dead. But since it's IKEA, remember, since yours is a round sphere and these funeral lanterns are square, we've all decided it's okay. So I was like, whew, who would it? I went to IKEA, there was no instruction manual, there was no guidance. Exactly.
Only for funerals.
So it's just a funny example of how serious those cultural faux pas can get. And preparing yourself and understanding and doing a deep dive before you move to another culture is really important. But that's just living and working there where you really want to have a good team, good collaboration, everything. But you can imagine how much deeper of a dive you need if you're actually creating something. And that something, that destination has to lure people in. You really have to be aware of the culture.
Yes, exactly.
Deeply.
I think that Disney has learned over time, perhaps maybe the hard way. So you mentioned you're at Disneyland, right? Which is the original name of Disneyland Paris.
Right.
And that I haven't heard that in a long, long, long time. But there are many lessons
I have a watch
learned
that says it.
even in that. All right,
Yeah.
so I'm going to give you a quick break to sip a little bit while I thank
Great.
our amazing sponsors, D3 Brewing Company. So D3 Brewing Company, they make retired rides, which is not here yet, but I will find it. It's hard to get. Benny's Brew, Midnight Pumpkin, et cetera, and they have been incredible sponsors of our show. So thank you very much, D3 Brewing Company, for supporting this show. You guys are fantastic.
We're taking a quick bourbon break, so while glasses are refilled, let's talk about something as important as a good pour: your marketing. I'm the founder of Butler Marketing Group, and we help businesses, small, medium, and Fortune 500, navigate growth and transformation with marketing that's strategic, intentional, and built to leave a legacy. Whether you need branding, marketing strategy, loyalty, or a fractional chief marketing officer, we've got the perfect blend of services for your business. Contact Butler MG to get started. Now, back to the show.
Next to you and the power of narrative experience design. So please share what exactly is that and how can brands use that to create really meaningful connections with their customers and their audiences.
That's great. I don't know how to condense it, so that's a bit of a discussion. Narrative experience design is something that I came up with while I was asking the very hard questions about my career, right? So COVID time, like thousands of others, I was furloughed 7 months. And when you know this very well, probably many members of your audience know this, when you come off of a very intense leadership role where you're doing 60, sometimes 70 hours a week, you're traveling all the time, and then everything just literally takes a skidding stop.
Yep.
You feel like a bit of a caged animal. You were working in this flow state and then you stop. And when I got over that challenge and I said, look, let me use the time, I really asked myself these cathartic questions because I really wanted to know. I'm young enough that I was in my 50s. I'm young enough that I don't want to stop, and I don't want to work for anybody else. So what do I do? Is what I've learned and what I've experienced, is it usable anywhere else? Is it just, am I always going to be the theme park guy? Or is it applicable? So that was the questions. And I just started laying out, well, here's what I know. And would anybody be interested in learning this? Would it help anybody? And would any other segment of the global economy find anything that I've done helpful? Could I move the needle for anybody else? So that it was kind of born out of this just really honest assessment of where do I go from here? Yeah. And what I realized is that everything I did with Disney was based on a story. And I called it narrative because story can be misconstrued of once upon a time, Goldilocks was in the woods, and if you're a bank, you don't want to think about telling stories like that. But narratives are structures that give guidance and that provide that North Star and that ability for you to have guiding principles to work on. So narrative was important. Experience is really what I've created. My whole professional career was experiences. And when I started thinking of experiences different than just a built place, and experiences are anything that a customer or a consumer, any engagement that a customer or consumer has with the brand, that's an experience. Some of those are bad experiences. Some of those are good experiences. And the last part was design, because that is really what I am at heart as a designer. And I thought, okay, if my whole career has been about building branded experiences that connect consumers or customers with a brand in an emotionally connective way, and if that's done well and it's done consistently by the brand across all their touch points, then that consumer, that customer should transform into something different. And I thought, well, I look at Disney fans and they're fans, and you don't have a demographic group that's a fan, you have an audience that's a fan. They love who you are. They follow bands because they love who they are, they love what they produce. So I got it in my head that if I work with clients to tell their brand story in a consistent way across all their touch points, with the goal to create and to design the experience at each one of those touch points, call center in Manila, frontline employee training, their flagship retail store, whatever it is, that I could take my experience from Disney and from other places, filmmaking, and then I could help them to do that. So that's how narrative experience design was born, and I'm having a blast using it. It's almost 5 years for me now with my company.
How do you think businesses can apply that, and what would be the one or two key things that they need to think about to get started?
Sure. Well, it would really be cheeky to say you need to hire me, so I won't say that.
But they should. I'm just saying.
But
I'm looking at the camera.
I think the reality is that everybody understands the mission, objective, right? When you're a startup and you're building your company, or you've been in business for 50 years, everybody kind of has that mission, vision, goals, everything like that. Those can tend to be, this is Theron's perspective only, those can tend to be a bit antiseptic, and they can tend to be a little bit non-engaging from a human standpoint. So what I've done with companies is to take those traditional descriptions of who they are and form a story about their brand. So I just call it a brand story. And it's 2 sentences, maybe 3 sentences, something that evokes and evokes an emotional response and captures who they are at the core. Why are you in business? Not how do you do business, not what you produce, right? Simon Sinek's golden circle. It's the core why. Because if you're telling stories about anything else, it's not really getting to the heart of why you exist. So once you've nailed that, now you've got your North Star. Now you can look at your website. You can look at your training. You can look at, how do I handle the human habits in your culture, right? Culture, I was just talking to one of your former guests about this. Culture could be looked at from so many different perspectives. And oftentimes we bring our own biases about culture into the definition of culture. But if you look at culture as a system of human habits, now all of a sudden you can really guide what that is. And everybody has a very distinctive understanding of how do I act within this place, and it's based on my brand story. So
Amazing.
yeah, anyways, I
Amazing.
could keep going.
Because we're going to dive into this. I invited you for a second show, and I think we're going to talk more about
cool.
that in another time, because I've shared with you my branding process, my Butler Branding Boot Camp, but I haven't heard yours, and I'm really excited to understand, because I think that branding is so critical to businesses, and often it's something they sort of skip to the tagline, or I want to create a logo,
Right.
and they miss the really nuts and bolts work of the strategy piece of it, and they'd love to understand how you get businesses there. So we're going to put a pin in that for later.
Great. Well, I should say I'm not a marketeer. I just play one on TV. So, yeah.
Okay, so how can businesses apply the art of blending storytelling and commercial spaces? How can they apply that to something outside of themed entertainment?
Absolutely. Storytelling is literally about engaging with your customer in a really deeply emotionally engaging way. If you are in the business of shoes and you sell shoes, there are lots of people who sell shoes. You quite literally only have several different levers that you can pull to stand out in the market, to capitalize on market share, to reduce your margins and make more profit. I mean, there's only a few things you can do. And one of the things that I think story does is it looks at the relationship that you as a company, through your brand, have with your customer. And it's thinking differently about that. So the story could be about, making one up now, your shoe company was established in 19 blank. And it was the thinking that great grandmother such and such invented this idea for a shoe store because her children's shoes would wear out walking to school every day. And she thought of and invented a new type of sole, all this of course I'm making up, a new type of sole that wouldn't wear out and would be more comfortable and would withstand the snow and the mud and all those things. And it got so popular that everybody in the town wanted them, and pretty soon you've got these shoes. So if you were never told that that story will touch people emotionally and deeply and may reverberate for generations, then you won't think to include that. You'll just think mission and vision, and it might get included in there, but oftentimes it kind of gets skipped over and not favored. Even in the world of Don Miller and how important story is important, but story is nothing if you don't use it to inform the experience. Right. And that, I think, is the big difference.
Yeah. You reminded me, there's a vintage clothing store in the Philadelphia burbs where I lived for a while. And when you walked into the store, and I don't even know if these stories are real or not, but each tag on a piece of clothing, or like it could be a scarf, it could be a dress, whatever, had a story associated with it. It was like,
that is
Betsy
cool.
used to wear this one on her picnic dates with Dave back in the 1930s, and he would make sandwiches and whatever, and you're just like, now I want to buy the dress because it's Betsy's.
I know it's 500 and I know it's vintage, but
and it's a
wow,
little worn. But
that's
it
very
was
cool.
just a brilliant way of telling individualized stories to bring you into something.
It's a perfect example.
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. So I don't know why other businesses don't do that. Anyway, okay, that's an aside. All right, so lessons in leadership from themed entertainment. So you've been in themed entertainment for like 3 decades, right? And you've led amazingly large projects and creative teams. What do you think, looking back, is what really guided you from a leadership perspective? What lesson do you hold on to from that? So
many. How do I boil it down? I think the reality about leadership is the same as our discussion that we were having, is not to lose sight of the fact that you're dealing with people, and people inherently are social beings. Even introverted people have the desire to be connected in some way socially. And so I think that it's very important to remember the people that you're leading, they all have a story. They all have a life. They have good things that have happened to them. They have had challenging things that have happened to them. And the sum total of that experiences have led them to this moment that you're leading them. And I always felt like, even in areas where I wasn't an expert, right? I'm not an expert in marketing. I'm not an expert in graphic design, even though I do. I'm not a lighting designer. I always felt like I had to know enough about the different teams and the different levels of experts that I was leading, that I could speak that language,
Right.
air quotes, because I always felt like when I was in that role and I was a scenic painter, the art director of the film would come down, and we had the sheet of paper that said this set is pink and the trim is blue and blah, blah, blah. And this person would come down, and then I would get yelled at because they really wanted it the other way around, blue with pink. And then I would say, and then, it was, you don't matter, go ahead and take care of this. So I never wanted to lead in that way.
Right.
And so I always thought it was really important you can't be best friends with the people that you lead all the time, because there, I think, needs to be a distance. But understanding what they do helps you to guide them in a way that appreciates what they're bringing to the table. And then the other point is, I really think it's important to have a vision when you're leading, because you can point people to the vision. They could get excited about being a part of the vision, and then you give them the room to participate in that vision, room to make mistakes, room to take risks. And at the end of the day, even if it was your idea, it'll be so much better because everybody else has contributed to it. And then everybody can stand back and say, look what we did.
Yeah.
I think that's key. That's the kind of team I want to work on.
Absolutely. Can you think of what team that was in your experience?
In my experiences?
Yeah. If you feel like sharing, I mean, I can think of a couple of teams that I just think that was like a magic moment.
Yeah.
Right. It was just the right combination of people, the right
Yeah.
mission that we were all driving towards, and
So-
you go, wow, I just got so lucky. Cannot believe I got to be there.
Yeah, so many teams, so many moments. I think I'll go back, because I often don't go way back, and so all the examples I give are kind of recent projects. So I'll go way back and say that my first full-time role at Imagineering, I was hired as the art director for, at the time, it was the Disney MGM Studios, and I was there for 8 years. So that was it was an amazing lesson, being embedded. That role in Imagineering, for anyone in your audience who doesn't know, that's an embedded role. So you work with the operations teams 365. And I learned so much. But that team, what we created there and what we pioneered, that was in the early Synergy days at Disney. And some of the most amazing people I got a chance to work with. But that team was firing on all cylinders. And we did so many amazing things at the studios, and that was just amazing to be a part of. It felt like everybody had shorthand, and you had this everybody was in a flow state where this is what we need, and everybody just hopped to, and we knew exactly what it was, and I love that.
So some of the most proudest moments in my life have been in things to where it was bigger than me. I was just playing a piece of it, right?
Yeah.
Amazing. Creative ideas that didn't make it. Pick one or two. Was there a concept, a project, something or other that you just thought, man, I love this, I just want to see it, and it didn't happen?
Yeah.
By the way, I feel like in my career I've started more projects than I've ever finished. I don't know if you feel that way too. Like either the leadership change, the perspective change. But yeah, so tell me about a couple creative projects that just never made it there.
I could do a lot with Disney, but I won't, because we've talked mostly about Disney. So let me jump to my time at the Designers Creative Studio, and I'll basically say I've done quite a lot of work in Saudi Arabia. And what I've learned after 4 years of working there is It is, what was the book? It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Is that Steinbeck? Because there's some amazing, they want to spend billions and billions of dollars. So as a creative, you're like, I can
afford to do all this.
They're asking me to, yeah, I can afford it. I've got the $30 billion budget. What? That's insane. And it's over the top, and you can create, and it's crazy amount of art. But the other end of the sword is that it's a whole lot of concept, and a lot of those concepts don't actually transition to real projects, and that was frustrating. So one of those projects, I can't. I'm under an NDA, so I can't do too much. Sure. But it was a new kind of physical experience, competitive physical experience that was leveraging technology and storytelling and gamification and crazy size of immersive environments. And man, if there's anything that I really wanted to be built, it was that. It may still, but that was probably one of the most fun creative projects Disney, ever been on. It was amazing.
No disrespect.
No disrespect. That gave me the foundation to do that, so happy about that.
So you have this incredible podcast called The League of Extraordinary Storytellers.
Yep.
Give me the background. And what of the people that you've interviewed, because you've got 3 episodes
That's right.
as of our taping, but I'm sure you have more in the can. What has been the most insightful or inspiring conversation that you've had so far?
Holy cow, you're making me boil it all down.
Don't make me pick my favorite child.
I know, totally. Well, I should say that I never, just like being an author, I never thought of myself doing that. And yet here we are. But you know how it is with your circle of people that you trust and that you respect. And then when they encourage you to do something, you're kind of like, oh, I see the value, and you take the leap. And League of Extraordinary Storytellers was that leap. And the whole kind of vision, the basis of that was, there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of great shows. I'm on one now. So I didn't want to just produce another show. What I thought could be a differentiator was on themed entertainment projects. There is such a huge variety of talent. We have this great word, cross-functional work and interdependencies and all these things, which are all true, but those are $10 words to describe this idea of a very integrated team with a whole lot of different experts. And a lot of those experts are in 2 categories: the technical category, and the work that they do is that way, and the non-technical, the writers, the artsy people, right, the painters. And somehow you have to slam those people together with lots of sparks flying and produce, these game-changing, emotionally connecting, branded environments. And so what I wanted on the podcast was to invite individual experts that were somewhat different and sometimes very different from me and from what I do. And I thought that my audience would really enjoy learning from how we converse, how we share, and maybe a tip of the hat to how it's actually done on projects. That was kind of hopefully my differentiator there.
So is there anything surprising or inspiring that's come out of those so far?
I would say, wow. I'll pick with my very first episode was with Craig Russell, who is a former co-president of Imagineering. It's back at a time when it was Craig and Bruce Vaughn were both leading Imagineering. It was the majority of my career with Disney, actually. And Craig had some really cool descriptions, and he was saying it's very mission-driven work, and for a technical leader that is Craig, architect, business major, he is so creative. And just to have that discussion with him, I think was so amazing, because one of the things that I say a lot is I wish, and I feel some of my mission is, I wish that creative people were more business-minded, and I wish business people were more creative-minded. And when you have a conversation with somebody like Craig, who really embodies that in such a well-balanced way, it's just, it's amazing. So that was one of the things I appreciated the most.
Fantastic. So your book, Creating Memorable Worlds.
That's right. Creating Memorable Worlds, a journey into themed experience design. So we talked a little bit about narrative experience design and how I came to that. The book itself really was a part of that early discussion of, is anything that I ever learned, could it help anybody? Yeah. Would anybody benefit from what I, and it was an honest question of myself. Is I don't want to dilute myself and have my ego say, well, of course people would be, because the fall from that would be really painful. So I decided to create online courses during my furlough. So I did a lot of taping, a lot of different things, learned a lot about lighting and teleprompters and all these things, editing, and actually created this and got it launched. And people were responsive and happy with it. And as I developed my company and things, I learned a lot more, and I grew, and I said, there's more to the story that I could tell. So I launched a book. I wrote a book, and then I designed the book, and I did all the illustrations and the graphic design, because I'm a visual learner, and I know a lot of my readers will be visual learners. And I thought I wanted to take them on a journey from this industry. And what is the industry? Who works in the industry? What's the processes? How do you work as a team?
Themed entertainment.
And themed entertainment. Okay. And then chapter 8, there's 9 chapters. Chapter 8 is literally, how do you go beyond themed entertainment? And that is a little bit of, well, actually it's a very deep dive into narrative experience design. So others can take what they know, what they've learned, and adapt it to the outside world. Chapter 9 is all about, how do I take all this stuff for myself and benefit? How do I apply this and really make a journey for my own career? So anyways, that's the book. There's a website on the book's name, creatingmemorableworlds.com. Anybody who's interested could go there. And we're doing a pre-order right now. First 250 pre-orders get a signed, numbered book.
Very nice.
And a whole bunch of other goodies that they can participate in.
I love it. Who is your ideal target audience for this book, and what do you think are the key lessons that you'd like them to take from it?
Ideal audience. Well, I definitely think any individual who's learning or is passionate about the industry and really wants to come into it. So students, I would imagine a high school student, I would love it if they got the book. When I was enamored with Star Wars in those early days, one of my family members got me the Industrial Light and Magic book, and it was this, just game changer, just over the moon, just wow. And I would love it if I could be inspirational if the book could be inspirational to somebody like that. Also, believe it or not, in my professional coaching business, I get a lot of individuals who are in the industry now. And they're like, I've learned all these things, but I kind of want to shift. I want to pivot what I'm doing and move to another place. So I'm hopeful that there's a portion of the readership that takes that advantage, right, as well. That they look at it and say, oh, now I have a deeper understanding. Now I can chart my course. I know how to kind of move the needle there. So I think those are the most targeted audience. I have quite a lot of friends who are educators in this field. And because there's no, it's not like chemistry where there's a standard chemistry curriculum. There's no standard in this industry. So I'm very hopeful that my book will be helpful to educators literally all over the world to fill in maybe some of the gaps in their teaching curriculum.
Fantastic. So we're going to wrap up with a couple standard questions.
Okay.
First one, if your approach to design was a bourbon, what would it be and why?
I have a cheeky answer on it, not only because I have a bottle of it at home. I would say Angel's Envy, because I think what we do in design is so transformational. That's the objective, right? If you're an industrial designer and you design appliances, one of the design criteria is not what you design has to make an emotional connection with the customer. Whereas in themed entertainment, it does. So it has to be durable, it has to have a life cycle, it has to be cool, it has to represent a story. But most importantly, whatever you design, even a physical building, has to make an emotional connection. So I think it's the envy of the design industry to work in this field.
Well played, sir. If you could experience something at Disney for the first time ever again, fresh eyes, what would it be?
Probably the moment that the lights on Main Street go out and the fireworks begin, the projection on the castle, the stage show. I just got goosebumps. That was a moment that I had as a longtime Imagineering employee and Disneyland, and we were walking to, if you've ever been backstage at Disneyland, it's very compact, right? So you have to go through the park to get to different parts of it. So the team that I was working with late in the evening, we were cutting through Town Square. And it just happened to be when we were right in the center of Main Street, that happened. All the lights went off, the snow machines went on. It was so magical that all of us were just stopped in our tracks. So that moment of awe, as a designer, as an experienced designer, is so hard to create. And to just have all these experiences from my time at Disney where it was successfully done is amazing.
And I hope that you pull it off.
And hope that you pull it off.
Because you're around all these people and they're experiencing it.
Exactly.
You're hoping that what you're creating is
Exactly.
truly what they're experiencing.
Yep.
So I also ask guests, you're going to be asked in just a minute, what would they want me to ask a future guest? So here's a question that has been shared. How do you differentiate yourself and your services? It could be your show, your book, et cetera, et cetera. How do you differentiate those and yourself from everyone else?
So my key differentiation, I believe, is the fact that I have done it. I'm very much in the doing and less about the theory. And that's no shade on anybody that's academically inclined or talks more about the theory, but I've had the blessing of being in a place where I can create something from nothing, a blank sheet of paper, design it, be there to build it, be there to open it. And so the principles that I represent, my consulting business, everything like that, my book, my podcast, what differentiates me is that I've done what Walt wanted to do, which was dream it and do it. And I think that's a big difference for sure.
Absolutely. So you and I met through Magic Makers. I think Magic Makers is very similar. It's that excellence in action.
Yeah.
It goes beyond the theory. It goes beyond the consulting. It's truly implementing it into practice.
Absolutely. And what we do is, another big word, $10 word, is guest-centric. We're very, very focused on the end user of the product, of the experience.
Yeah. What would you like me to ask a future guest?
I think a question that doesn't get asked a lot in our line of work is, how do you balance your life and your work? And what are some of the tools that you use to do that? The support system that we have, whether it's family, extended family, friends, is so important to our individual success. To not just pick us up when we fall down, but to be the coach and the inspirer and the keep going, and I'm here for you. And so I would like your next guest to focus on delivering that story, because everybody has one.
Okay, very much so. Well, thank you. I'm so grateful that you've been here. And your journey has just been remarkable. I mean, I think that people are going to watch this and go, what an incredible career.
Awesome.
And you've still got many more chapters.
I'm still young.
Literally, the book, the podcast, your consulting business, amazing. And so thank you for sharing your insights with us today.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I think that, you spent a great deal of time shaping these amazing immersive experiences for Disney, for other companies. And it's clear that at the heart of it is touching the hearts and minds of people and storytelling.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a great deal that people can take away from this show today and implement it in whatever their business may be, right?
I do hope so.
Absolutely. I also want to thank our friends, Skip and so forth at D3 Brewing Company. They've been an amazing sponsor. They make very fine craft beers such as Benny's Brew, Three Wishes, Midnight Pumpkin, Retired Brides, and more. So thank you for sponsoring the show. I very much appreciate it. And then for everyone watching this show today, I hope that you have learned something from this conversation, that it sparked an idea about how you can bring storytelling to your brand, your business, creative projects, et cetera, et cetera. And it may be building an immersive guest experience. It may be strengthening your brand identity or just finding new ways to engage your audience. But I think there's something that you can all take here from Theron's experience in our conversation. So thank you again. If you enjoyed this episode, please like it, share it, subscribe to Marketing Over Bourbon, and remember that the best ideas often come when you take a moment to savor something great. So drinks up, Kungaloosh. We'll see you next time. Cheers.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.